All right, let's get into this one and let's have a good time because this should be fun. Kriega Bundle. Welcome back to the library, everybody. Welcome to the place where we discuss Robert E. Howard pretty much all the time, except for those few times where I go off on my little old man side quests, which take me into a variety of roads. But today we're not going to talk about that. Today we're sticking with the Robert E. Howard stuff. Now, you guys already clicked on the thumbnail. It was back there at the beginning. You know what we're talking about today. We're talking about the 1995 to 1996 series, small one, of Conan the Savage. Now, this is a fun little Marvel series that came out, and I'll talk a little bit about what I think the raison d'etre to it was later, right? But I think it's not appreciated enough for what it is. So today we're shooting our review of part 1, okay? And there's a reason why we're doing part 1, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But today we're going to walk through the first 6 issues. And there's a reason why I truncated it there, too. We'll talk about that later. We're going to walk through these, and I'm going to talk about what I think the actual purpose of this series was, number 1. Then we're going to talk about the geniuses that were involved in actually creating this thing, number 2. And then we're going to finish this one up with just me highlighting 2 key stories that I thought really just jumped off the page to me that I think if you're a Conanophile, you'll enjoy as well. Then we're going to wrap this whole one up and we're going to move on. But for those of you who are regulars out there, you know who you are. You know who you are. You know we have Easter eggs here. We do. We have those. You know those. I got something in that Easter egg just for you guys. Find it. This could be a lot of fun. All right, let's get into the books. All right, let's talk about what the series was itself. Now, this is one of those what questions, all right? So we're going to start with the what. Then we're going to get to the who. We're not going to go into the rest of the other ones, but we're just going to start with those 2, okay? What is this? Well, for many of you who are Conanophiles now, you've probably been Conanophiles for quite some time. Like, you're probably of the same generation and genre that I am, where you've been buying these for quite a while. You remember that dark, dark day when Savage Sword of Conan ended. All the way back in May of 1995. I believe it was May. Or was it April? It doesn't matter. It was around there. It was early in the year of 1995. The sun was blotted out in the sky. Grunge music was just dying horribly. And Savage Sword of Conan ended. It did. It was a rather dark day. It was around the same point in time that you had the Conan the Barbarian series end at Marvel. It was just a hard truncation to those. That's when these came in. There was a Conan comic that followed in that 1995 year, which was an 11-part series that came out in June of 1995. And that continued into 1996. And 1 month after that, the first issue of this series, this Conan magazine, came out that was a 10-part series, even though I guess it was supposed to be longer. That came out in July of 1995. So they ran parallel. So effectively you had the old Conan the Barbarian, which was always running parallel to Savage Sword, and then there was Conan Saga at the same time. You really just cloned that and brought it forward to 95. New titles, new people involved, trying to, I guess, put a shot in the arm and an injection back in this series to bring it back up to what they thought it should have been selling at. So you really had this coming in as the continuation of Savage Sword of Conan. And let's talk about this a little bit here. Let's grab them the issues here. Here's issue number 1, okay? You've already seen this in the thumbnail. And what these were they were beautifully painted covers by a variety of artists for each issue. They were black and white. As you can see, it's clearly magazine format. And the idea here was you were really trying to take that level of aggressiveness, of that sort of pushing the limits of what you could present in a book as far as the gore and the guts, and putting it into this magazine format to continue on what was the appeasement of the readers that were looking for Savage Sword of Conan. Interesting, and what they did here was they really followed the model in Savage Sword as well. And let's talk about that for a second. Effectively, what you had back in the Savage Sword was sometimes you had self-contained stories where it would just be the entire issue was one story. Oftentimes, those one stories would continue from one issue of Savage Sword to the next. Well, in Conan the Savage, what they did was they were breaking up the book. Every issue was breaking up the book. You had one story in the front, and you had one story in the back. Some of these were one-parters, some of them were more than one-parters, and we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to those 2 stories that I mentioned that we'll talk about in the last section of this particular video. But really you had this series being pumped out at that rate. You could either pick an issue up, read the one-parter if it was a one-parter, or read the first or second part of whatever story it was you were reading. But effectively, you had a Robert E. Howard-esque Conan story in here. So that's really what the issue was. And there was a very interesting twist, and I'm going to comment on this right now. There was a really cool crossover that happened in issue 4 of the Conan comic, which was a color comic in traditional comic format, and issue 4 of Conan the Savage, which was the black and white magazine. It tied in a third book, but you know what? I'm going to shoot an entirely separate video on that, because I'll tell you, it draws in one of my favorite characters from the Malibu universe, which Marvel had aggressively unicroned and just bought and destroyed at that point in time, which I'm still a little bitter about today. See how he just turned the phrase unicron into a verb? Yeah, unicron. It just, we're not going to talk further on that, but that'll be a different video. So effectively, that's what this series was. Now, who are the people who are involved? Let's talk about that part now. Let's talk bench strength for a minute, okay? Let's have this conversation. Who are the people involved in this series? Well, let's talk about the writers. Let's start with that, shall we? There are 2 real writers that within the first 6 issues just jump off the page to you as a reader. And if you're a Conanophile, you're going to know them. So let's just briefly run through those here, because really most of us already know Conan, okay? The first one, and this is the person who writes the first stories in a bunch of these. Remember I mentioned there's 2 stories per issue. The first stories in a bunch of these is Chuck Dixon. Now, Chuck Dixon is known to you Conanophiles. He's written a lot of Conan, and from the Conan that I've read, I really got a sense of what Chuck writes in Conan is really the full-blown beast mode Conan. This is the Conan that's out there just being a killer. He is the guy that's got swords all over the place, muscles larger than, well, quite frankly, put the sofa sitting over there, and he's just out there bashinating things and just being the killing machine that he is. And that's what Chuck Dixon writes. He's really good at it. That's what he's comfortable with Conan. I mean, if you read the Siege on the Black Citadel book over there again, that one as well, you see Conan being this beast mode individual. This one has a little bit more of the whole thought process that goes within it as well. And if you want to see a review on that, there's one on my channel. You can go back and check it out. But really, when Chuck's writing the comics, you really do get a sense of that full-blown action and adventure type story that he's drawn Conan into. The second writer on this one, and this is the one that I think we all know, and we all know what's coming, Roy Thomas. That's right, Roy Thomas, the man who brought Conan to Marvel, is writing the second story in each issue. And this was done intentionally. It really was done in a rather intelligent way by Marvel Comics. They knew that Roy's the guy who knows Conan all the way, all day, every way, every aspect of Conan. He's the guy who writes the Conan that can be the bashing machine, but he's also the guy that writes the Conan that can be the thinking machine. He's the guy that knows the context of where Robert E. Howard has written this stuff from, but as well is well versed in all the people around Robert E. Howard, because Robert E. Howard wasn't writing in isolation. Robert E. Howard was writing as part of a community, and he drew in things from other sources. And really, Roy Thomas takes the time when he's writing his Conan stories to make sure that Conan was within that larger realm, within that larger piece of stories. I'm going to talk to one of his stories when we get to the next part, where I'm talking about the 2 stories that really jumped at me that I wanted to bring out to you guys. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit then. But for now, we're just going to leave that topic alone. Those are the 2 writers. Let's talk about artists for a second here. Okay. Savage Sword of Conan did a freaking amazing job. It did. Every issue had a beautiful painted cover. Different artists coming in all the time, rotating through. And on the interior work, you also had that different artistic style coming to each particular issue. I made a video previously where I actually said, here's my favorite Savage Sword of Conan issue that was ever produced. And I'll put the image to the cover up over here. That's Savage Sword of Conan number 176, I believe. And within that, you have a bunch of different artistic styles and really writing styles all coming through within one issue. This one's one of my favorites because it actually shows all of that variety in one book. And it's done intentionally. Conan the Savage has done that. They've copied that model. Because, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's take a look at a couple of the painted covers right here. Okay, you've already seen it. Conan the Savage number 1. Looks pretty cool, right? That's a Simon Bisley? I'm gonna say Bisley. That's one of his works. Let's go back over here for a second. Here's another one. Like, when you're looking at these, they continuously change and you have some variety. You have the Hildebrands doing a cover in here. You got a whole bunch of different painted covers that really show you different aspects of how people pictured Conan in the painted medium. And that's really well done. Interior, though, you have the variety per issue. So where you have one writer writing the front story, a different writer writing the back story, you also had one artist working on the front story, one artist working on the back story. One of the artists that stayed through this that was sort of staple, and I'm going to probably massacre this last name, is Enrique Alcatena, I think is how you say it. Not somebody that I've seen before, but I gotta tell you, when I opened up issue 1 to read the story, I'll tell you, one of the images really just jumped at me. And I'm gonna show you guys that image here. So here, I gotta tell you, this one, when I saw it, made me go, whoa! And it's not something in an artistic style that I was used to seeing in Conan. And I don't remember seeing this artistic style in Savage Sword, but I could go back to my Savage Sword and I might find it actually in there. But when I saw this reminded me materially of one of the favorite pieces of art that I've ever seen in Conan, which again goes back to my Savage Sword Conan number 176 issue. And I'm going to show you an image of that over here. And I got to tell you, the first one clearly reminded me of this. And it was funny because I had to get out my original 176 and take the two side by side and say, yeah, they're definitely different, but I could totally see the similarities here. And when that came out in issue 1, for me, that was a real powerhouse moment of, wow, they're bringing it to the table. I really do have to appreciate this. And that I thought was rather cool. Now, granted, this art style is not going to be the best for every Conan fan out there. There are going to be some people who are out there who are just going to say, I hate this. To me, this was a nice piece of variety. And I like the fact that this is an artistic style they chose to carry through issues 1 through 6, which are the ones I've gone through thus far. The other powerhouse that came in here, Jeff Isherwood. Now, Jeff has done a lot of Conan work in the past, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but he's done a lot of other work as well. He's done the superhero genre. I believe he's well known for doing the Doctor Strange stuff in the 90s. And really, he's an artist that I think depicts Conan and the world he lives in well. And there's a story here that's at the end of issues 5 and 6 that were done by him, which really, honestly, the story and the art was done so well. I enjoyed it so much, but when I was saying, okay, I'm going to do a top 2, it gets honorable mention. Definitely gets honorable mention, because honestly, the guy knows the world Conan lives in, and he knows how to draw it, and he knows how to really depict the scene. And I think those are some of the key artists and key geniuses that came into this one. So if you know any of those names, if you like any of the work by those people, well, you already know that this magazine is definitely bringing something to the table. All right. Let's wrap this section up now. Let's get into the next part where I'm just going to talk about 2 stories that jumped off the page to me and why I like these 2. No spoilers, no spoilers, just what are the general pieces of these. Then we'll wrap this one up with maybe here's the issues you guys want to pick up. All right, let's talk about some of the books within this and some of the stories within this that were really the powerhouses that made this one go, okay, we just went from, one of the terribly written and terribly drawn miniseries of that era to really something that we should be paying attention to. Let's talk about the first one. Now, you guys know I discussed Chuck Dixon in the last section. I said he really writes beast mode level of story. I also talked to that whole thing with the Enrique Alcatena. Again, I'm sure I'm massacring that name, but we're doing the best we can here, guys, okay? And really what he brought to the table being something that was refreshing to me and really an artistic style that I appreciated and I thought did well with Chuck Dixon's writing. So when 2 of them were married together in the very first story in the very first issue, in a story called Hounds to the Slaughter, honestly, that was one where I said, whoa! And by the time I was done, I said, okay, I need to pay serious more attention to this series. This is something that honestly should jump out to people and they should be picking up. Hounds to the Slaughter was a rather interesting one because it gets back to what Chuck's ballywick really is from what I've seen, which is writing that powerhouse beast mode Conan. This story is a seasoned Conan. This is a Conan that does not taking any crap. He is a jaded individual. He is just a mass killer. And at the end of this, Conan does not solve the larger issue at hand. But Conan's involvement in the larger issue at hand really is one that makes you go, okay, I've seen some character development, not so much in Conan, but in the world around him. I've seen this stoic monolith that is Conan, beautifully depicted, influence the people around him in such a way that they're growing, they're learning, and they're developing. And really that story to me was a key one. And that one was in issue number 1. Issue 1, first story, Hounds to the Slaughter. Honestly, you're going to want to pick that one up if you really like Chuck Dixon work. I think that's really the powerhouse story he wrote in these first 6 issues. The second story that I thought was a cool one, and this is kind of a neat one. It's a Roy Thomas story. It's called Stalkers in the Snow. It's a 3-parter, all right? And it goes from issues 2, 3, and 4. And issue 4 I'm going to talk to in a second here and why this one's so important, because we're going to sort of minimize its involvement in the overall series 1 to 6 so far. But 2, 3, and 4 do have this key story, which is Stalkers in the Snow. And Stalkers in the Snow draws from Robert E. Howard, but it also draws from 2 other sources. Lovecraft, and it gives free reference to Lovecraft within it. It says, yeah, it is also based off of this. And I went to my big book of Lovecraft over here, and unfortunately, I'm missing the specific story that they took the inspiration for that one out of. I don't have it. I'm pretty sure I know specifically what within this story actually comes directly from that, though. But I'm not going to spoil that for you. If you've read the Lovecraft story, you're going to know. When you read this, you're going to smell it. You're going to see it coming from a mile out. The surprising part in this one, though, actually came from Edgar Allan Poe. And it's interesting because I was halfway through second part of the 3-part story, and I was going, where's the Poe influence here? And the good part about it was at the beginning of this, remember I mentioned that Roy Thomas does actually reference where he draws in his material from when he's pulling it from the world that Robert E. Howard was within. Well, he did that here. And he referenced the specific story of Edgar Allan Poe's that he drew this in from. And when I was sitting there, I was thinking, where's the Poe piece of this? So I got out my big book of Poe. There. I got that one out. I gotta tell you, that's an incredibly tiny font story. And I read that years ago, and it took me a long time to read. It was only when I flipped to the actual story, I went, what are they referencing? I went, oh. And when you read the story, again, I'm going back in my memory reading it years ago, when you read that, and then you look at this, you can clearly see the inspiration that Roy Thomas was drawing from. And honestly, taking that Roy Thomas pistache of grabbing these other pieces of stories and these other inspirational pieces of the world that Robert E. Howard lived in and building it into his story, it wrote just a powerhouse of a story. It was a really good one. The other aspect of this one, and this is why this one particularly speaks to me, and I know this is a me thing, and probably the rest of you aren't going to be really on board with this. For some reason, the Queen of the Black Coast story for Robert E. Howard, for me, is the top. This is the best one of Conan that he wrote. And Conan the Barbarian number 100, The Death of Bellet. Literally, I seem to have issues with this book. Every time I see it, I have to buy another copy. I've got way too many copies right now. This story is actually the story that goes right before issue 100. It's the last Bellet and Conan story right before issue number 100. And when you get that piece of context right at the end of the 3-part series, you go, it just speaks. It speaks to the motivation of the characters within this story, and it also develops a little bit more about speaking to the character motivation within Conan the Barbarian number 100. Such a powerful piece. Just huge. Now, speaking of story, though, I do need to talk about issue number 4. And this comes back to that comment I made earlier where I referenced there was actually a weird twist in this series. And the twist comes in issue number 4 of the Conan the Barbarian Conan magazine, comic, a crossover with that Malibu character, and then closing off here in Conan the Savage, issue number 4, which takes up basically the majority of the actual physical book in issue number 4. I'm not going to talk to that one yet. What I'm going to do is a separate video where I actually take those 3 stories and we're going to talk through that then. And we're not going to include that herein as part of a story that you should get or shouldn't get. I'm telling you right now, that's one that I've just set aside. I'm not even considering it. Honorable mention obviously goes to the last 2 pieces of issues 5 and 6, which were the Jeff Isherwood stories that I thought were really well done. But again, I wanted to stick to the top 2. So again, you got Hounds to the Slaughter and Stalkers in the Snow. Now, let's wrap this one up with, if you're out there and you're considering buying these, do you need to get all 6? Should you actually just stick to a couple? Maybe there's some key hints we can give you here. Let's get into that part. Okay, $1 million question time. You're a Conanophile, you're out there walking through the comic shops or walking through a con or doing whatever it is you need to do. And you says to yourself, self, what do I need to buy here? Well, here's where I'm at, okay? And this is where I talk to, why do we park this one at issue number 6, okay? These are hard to find. Yeah, let's just call it as it is. These things are not the easiest magazines to find. And I'll tell you, the copies that I have, I know within the ones that are here, so there are somewhere I'm like, oh, I gotta upgrade this copy. Like, it's got a spine split, for crying out loud, almost 2 inches up from the bottom. Like, these are rough books in some cases. If you can find these in good conditions and you're a Cananophile, more power to you. Go out and buy them. If you want to buy them all and you can find them in great condition, great. Go for it. If you're somebody who really wants to just drill in though and just say, well, what do I need to get out of these top 6? Here's my hint and here's what you want to get, okay? If you're strictly a painted cover guy and you're saying to yourself, I'm only buying these for the awesome cover art, well, here's the 2 you want to get, okay? You want to get issue number 1. This is not issue number 1. You want to get issue number 5, all right? This is a Dan Brereton cover, all right? This guy knows his stuff, and I probably just massacred his last name as well. Dan, I apologize. You know, if you ever meet me and you say to me, Tennessee Fats, here's how actually you pronounce my last name, by all means, I'll do it going forward. This guy knows his stuff, and this cover to me is a hugely powerful cover. It's awesome. You do want to get this if you're a cover guy, all right? So that's issue number 5. As you guys have seen, this is issue number 1. And this one you also want to get, because again, it's the Simon Bisley cover. Now, I actually may have a chance to meet this guy at Niagara Falls Comic Con this year. And if I do, I am taking this and I'm getting it signed. That would be such a huge achievement for me. I'm really looking forward to that. But again, if you're a cover guy and you're just strictly buying these for the painted covers, issues number 1 and 5 are the ones you want to get. If you're going for story, okay, and this is where we're going to really start dwindling down here. If you're going for story and you want to read pure beast mode story, and I've already shown you an image of what the interior art looks like in this, you want to get issue number 1. So this one gets double hits. 1 for the cover and 1 for that issue number 1 for that Chuck Dixon story of Hounds to the Slaughter, okay? If you're a guy that's out there and you really like your Roy Thomas work and you like that world of Conan, you want to get issue number 2, 3, and 4. You want to get that Stalkers in the Snow story. That is huge. So really, it all depends on what your take in on this one is. If you're looking for cover art 1 and 5, okay? If you're looking for Chuck Dixon full-on beast mode Conan, issue 1. If you're looking for the thoughtful, pensive statement developing character Conan and you want that piece of that missing history of the Queen of the Black Coast, you want issues 2, 3, and 4. All right, guys, there's the issues you want, and that's where I'm wrapping this one up. Now, why have I stopped at issue number 6? Well, there's a very good reason for that. These are hard to find. They're ridiculously hard to find. I already have issues 1 through 6. I have issue 10. I am missing the ones in the middle. I've already pre-ordered some. They're on their way here. They will be here mid next month. But there's still one I know that's missing. I'm hopeful, Toronto Comic Con, we can fix that. Anyways, that'll be part 2. We'll get to that video later when they're here, and we'll do the same sort of wrap up when we're doing that. Let's wrap this one up. Let's get the heck out of here. All right, there is our part 1 review of the Conan the Savage magazine series that came out from 1995 to 1996. I gotta tell you, when I initially picked these up, I was just grabbing them because I saw them when I was at a show, and I thought, I'm gonna pick these up and bring them into the collection because I don't know this series all that well. When I said to myself, I should probably read these, which is something you should do with all your comics, by the way. You should read them. When I sat down to read them, I thought, oh, these are materially different than the other stuff I was seeing coming out from Marvel around the same point in time. I said, this deserves a walkthrough. And I'm hoping I gave you guys a good enough of a vignette or a snapshot here to wet your whistle, just to make you think to yourself, maybe I should pick some of these up. And I'm hopeful that you can actually take that last segment we did where I said, well, if you're interested in this, you probably want to buy this. Now, we'll come back and we'll do the part 2 later. But for now, let's wrap this one up. I got to go get underneath my diesel and try to find out how I'm going to fix this stupid coolant leak. So let's see you in the next video. All right, it's Easter egg time for you guys who stuck around, for you regulars, for you subscribers. This one's for you. Here's the thing, guys. I created this channel and I started making these videos because, well, quite frankly put, I really like Robert E. Howard stuff. I like Conan stuff. I like Cull stuff. You know, I'm really enjoying the short written horror stories collection that I'm having right now of Robert E. Howard. I'm not through it by any means. I'm getting there, but I really enjoy his stuff. And I made this because when I made the first couple of videos, I immediately started to see some sort of response. I started to see a sense of community. And I started to see people coming back and talking to me on a regular basis. I was getting emails from people. I was getting messages on the chats and what have you that YouTube has. And I'm not a technical guy by any means. In fact, I'm the exact opposite of a technical guy. As you can tell by the incredibly low quality video production in these very videos. I think that goes without saying. But I've done something for you guys. And I did something for me as well. How many of you know what this thing called the Reddit is? I'm willing to bet you do, okay? If you don't know what the Reddit is, get yourself on the Reddit. Reddit, is it T? It's one T, I just got it on the computer, .com. Get yourself on there. Because there are a couple communities in there that are specific to Robert E. Howard, Conan the Barbarian, and that whole genre. And I've been in there and I've been following, listening to people, and we talk comics in there, we talk about a bunch of things. And I thought that was a really neat thing, and it really helps to foment and really firm up that sense of community. I took it one step further, though. I did something that's specific to the people who are the followers on this channel. To you who are my viewers. I wanted to give you guys something back. I wanted to give you a chance to be out there and see a piece of the community that I see by being the one typing comments in response to you, and that I see in being the guy who's putting out the videos, but that you guys might not be getting. I don't think any of us should ever be in isolation. I think we should always be aware that we're valued and that we're surrounded by people with like interests and that we respect one another. And sometimes we're going to have differences of opinion. Sometimes we're going to be of the same opinion. But you know what? We're still all out there doing the same thing. We're just people. So I created what they call a subreddit. Now again, some of you might know what this is. Some of you might not know what this is. If you get yourself on the Reddit, and I'm pointing over here because this is the Reddit, and you type in Savage Sword, no space, you're going to see two forums come up, both of which are private, both of which are mine. That's right, I created two forums. One is called Savage Sword, the other one is called Savage Sword of Conan. Savage Sword of Conan, we're just parking and keeping it for later. But the Savage Sword one is one I have made for you guys and for the members of this community. And it's not something that's going to be out there to the public, because quite frankly put, I wanted to really keep it to us. And what I want you guys to do is, if you want to be part of this, I've set this up as sort of like a brainstorming area, an area where we can make comments and we can discuss things freely. We can talk about new things that are coming out with Conan, and we can talk about, for those of you who are creative and artistic, because I know many of you are, you can spitball ideas of, listen, here's a story I'm thinking of. What do you guys think? How can I change this? How can I move it? How can I develop it further? Maybe some art. You want to post your original art? Feel free. Here's what I want you to do to get access to it, if you're interested, because I've already had people on Reddit reaching out to me asking to join this thing. And I've already said, well, let's just get it up and running first. What I want you to do is send me an email. Get into the actual About Us stuff. Or get yourself into the Reddit and send an email request through there to join the forum. What I want you to do is point out your YouTube name and verify with me that you're publicly subscribed to the channel. If I see you're publicly subscribed to the channel, I can go into my back end on YouTube and I can see this and say, yes, no problem, you're in. It's that simple. I'm going to wait until we have a good number of people that are going to be in here, because I don't want one person coming in isolation then sitting there for a week or so, because sometimes these things take longer to format to go to fruition. But if you're into the topic, if you're into the actual genre and you want to be part of this, send me that request through Reddit, identify your YouTube username. I'll go in and verify that you're actually a public subscriber to the channel, and I'll grant you access. There are rules within the forum, though. There are rules, all right? They're going to be in there, all right? I made this a couple months ago, and I've just been thinking about how we're going to roll it out, and I think now is the time. So, again, get yourself into the Reddit, Savage Sword, find the forum, or subreddit as they call it, and request access. You show me that you're a public subscriber, we'll get you in. And this could be a lot of fun. I'm not going to be super active in this thing saying, here's what I think and you're wrong or you're right. I'm going to be active in this and I'm going to be supportive, and we're going to be discussing these topics openly and freely and without judgment, because I think that's kind of important. If you want to be creative, you got to let all sorts of things happen here. So let's just follow the rules and have a good time with this. Everybody, I'm doing this one for you. I hope you enjoy it.